Usually when we picture someone getting fired, um, there's a very specific, almost cinematic image that comes to mind.
Oh, absolutely. The classic, sit down in a glass office.
Exactly. You get called into a room, and there's a nervous manager sitting across from you. Maybe an HR rep is there taking notes. It's tense, it's uncomfortable, but it is fundamentally, a human interaction.
Right. You're looking at the actual person who made the decision.
Yeah.
There is a face to the consequence. And I mean, for a century, the basic assumption of employment has been that a human being had to weigh the factors, sit across the table from you, and physically sign their name to the outcome.
But imagine you walk into that room, or, more likely these days, you just open an email on a Tuesday morning, and there is no manager.
Yeah, just a notification.
Right. The termination paper wasn't signed by a human. It wasn't really even reviewed by one. And when you ask your company who decided to terminate my employment, the answer you get is just the system.
Which is terrifying.
And when you ask to speak to the system, or you ask how it calculated that you deserve to lose your livelihood, you're just told, the algorithm is proprietary.
Yeah.
You're just met with this absolute deafening silence. So, okay, let's unpack this, because this chilling, empty room firing scenario, that is the exact mission of our deep dive today.
It really is the pressing issue of our time.
We've got a whole stack of research here, but we are focusing really heavily on this thought-provoking article by AI thought leader Johan Steyn. It's titled, Managed, Monitored, and Finally Removed by a System with No Name.
That title alone is heavy.
It really is. And the most vital thing he points out is that this isn't science fiction. It's not some distant future. It is happening right now, today, to workers in Manchester, in Johannesburg, in Manila.
And that is the crucial context we have to establish right away, I think. Because we often talk about AI in the workplace as this ongoing experiment, or we theorize about some future disruption.
Right, like it's still in the lab.
Exactly, but Steyn's research makes it crystal clear that the experimental phase is over. It's done. AI is now operational infrastructure. It is fully embedded into the corporate machine.
Wow.
And the central problem we're exploring today isn't necessarily that AI makes inherently bad decisions. In certain narrow contexts, an algorithm might actually be faster and more consistent than, say, a human manager who's just having a bad day.
Sure, humans are flawed.
Right. The real crisis is that our entire framework of employment law worldwide, it relies on a human being making the final call. The law requires someone who can be questioned, someone who can be held accountable.
And without that human.
When you strip the human out and replace them with a proprietary algorithm, the legal framework just collapses.
Okay, but before a piece of software can actually fire you, it obviously has to, build a case against you. It has to be watching you.
Yeah.
So how exactly are these systems tracking workers today?
Oh, it's intense.
Because reading through the sources, it goes way, way beyond just logging when you swipe your badge at the door or seeing if your mouse is wiggling.
Oh, yeah. The surveillance is pervasive, and it operates at this granular level that most employees don't even comprehend. Steyn provides a breakdown of how deeply this tech infiltrates different sectors, and the mechanics of it are, well, they're quite revealing. Take call center workers, for example.
Okay.
Historically, they were evaluated on simple metrics, right? Like how many calls did you take in a shift?
Makes sense.
But today, they are judged by AI systems that actively analyze their vocal tone.
Wait, their tone of voice?
Yes. The software measures micropauses in their speech. It tracks the specific keywords they use and then cross-references all of that with real-time call resolution times.
That is wild.
And if the AI detects what it classifies as negative sentiment in your voice too many times a week, your internal performance score drops.
So it's basically playing armchair psychologist with the tone of your voice while you're just, trying to reset someone's router.
That is exactly the reality on the floor. And in warehouses, it's just as intense. Operatives are tracked against these hyper-specific productivity baselines.
Like quotas.
Yeah, but those baselines aren't set by a time and motion study done by a human. They are generated dynamically by AI.
What does that mean, dynamically?
It means the system calculates exactly how long it should take you to walk from aisle 4 to aisle 12, factoring in the specific weight of the package you're carrying.
Oh, wow.
And if you take a few seconds longer, you get flagged. And I mean, it extends far beyond blue-collar or entry-level service jobs, too. Back office employees at major financial services firms, they are increasingly subjected to behavioral analytics platforms.
Okay, wait, I need you to explain how that works in a corporate office setting. What does a behavioral analytics platform actually do when someone is just, sitting at a desk typing emails?
It basically processes the metadata of your daily work life. These platforms, they scan internal communications, they measure how quickly you reply to messages, who you collaborate with most often, even the complexity of the language you
Are you
use.
serious? The complexity of my emails.
Yeah. And they feed all those disparate data points into an algorithm to assign you a constantly updating efficiency score. That is. And the kicker is that all of this data feeds directly into human resources decisions, promotions, bonuses, disciplinary action.
And I'm guessing the employee has no idea.
Exactly. Often without the affected worker even knowing the system exists, let alone understanding how it mathematically calculates their worth to the company.
It is deeply unsettling to think about. I mean, you're working away believing you're doing a good job because, your boss smiled at you in the hallway. Meanwhile, this invisible analytics platform is secretly grading your email response times and deciding your career trajectory.
Yeah, it's a parallel reality.
But, whenever you read the marketing materials for these enterprise software tools, the vendors always push back. They claim, don't worry, there's a human in the loop.
Oh, always. That's the go-to line.
Right. They insist a real manager reviews the AI's recommendations before anyone actually gets disciplined.
The software vendors rely heavily on that defense. But Steyn argues we have to look really closely at the mechanics of what that review actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, because reading his breakdown of that so-called review process, I kept thinking of this analogy. It feels like a passenger sitting in the driver's seat of a self-driving car, right? But they're holding a disconnected plastic steering wheel.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, to anyone looking through the window, it looks like they're driving, but they aren't actually controlling the vehicle. Steyn points out that this human review is almost always incredibly cursory.
Oh, absolutely.
The manager is under immense time pressure. They have a million other targets to hit. So when the AI dashboard flashes a red warning next to an employee's name, the manager just clicks approve. They rubber stamp the AI's output.
They're just clearing their inbox.
Exactly. They aren't there because the company truly values their human judgment in that specific moment. They are sitting in that seat simply to cross a legal threshold.
Right, and what's fascinating here is the cascading effect this optical management has inside the organization. Because accountability without genuine oversight isn't accountability at all. It is merely a facade.
A total facade.
And Steyn really emphasizes the profound psychological toll this opacity takes on the workforce. Because when you're being assessed by a process you cannot see, you can't understand, and you can't challenge, it completely erodes trust.
It has to.
It collapses any sense of psychological safety. You're no longer just managing the normal stress of your job. You're managing the constant grinding anxiety of an invisible judge.
And if workers are feeling that intense psychological strain, eventually that boils over into formal complaints and lawsuits.
Without a doubt.
Which brings us to the legal pushback.
Yeah.
Because these corporate attempts to dodge accountability with rubber stamping managers, they're finally meeting real resistance from regulators. As we sit here in May 2026, the global legal landscape is shifting dramatically right now.
Oh, the timeline on this is moving incredibly fast. Regulators are really starting to pull the emergency brake. If we look at the UK, for instance, there has been a massive pivot away from their previous stance.
How so?
Well, for a while, the UK took a very light-touch, pro-innovation approach to workplace AI. The goal was to encourage tech development, attract investment. But the regulators have now seen what deployment actually looks like on the ground, and the tone has changed entirely.
Yeah, we're seeing that play out right this minute. The UK House of Commons Business and Trade Committee, they just closed evidence for their inquiry on April 3rd, 2026.
Right.
They're looking specifically at whether current worker protections are fit for purpose as AI embeds into recruitment and firing. They're preparing their report as we speak.
And alongside that parliamentary inquiry, the UK's Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, has a draft guidance consultation that is closing on May 29th, 2026.
Okay, so just around the corner.
Exactly. And what is notable about the ICO's move is that they are actively targeting that plastic steering wheel analogy you mentioned.
Oh, really?
Yes. They are explicitly demanding meaningful human involvement in AI-assisted processes. That means a manager can't just click approve on a dashboard anymore. They must be able to interrogate the raw data and genuinely understand the AI's logic before acting on its recommendation.
That is a huge shift. And the pushback is definitely not isolated to Europe either.
I want to bring in the South African context because the labor dynamics there make this issue incredibly urgent.
Absolutely.
The Department of Communications and Digital Technologies just gazetted the draft national AI policy on April 10th, 2026, and public comments are open until June 10th.
And what's crucial about this new framework is that it introduces specific risk tiers. It explicitly identifies employment decisions like hiring, promotion, discipline, and retrenchment as high-risk AI applications. It demands stringent governance and traceable lines of responsibility directly to an accountable human official.
That draft policy is a vital step for South Africa. But Steyn makes a crucial analytical point here that business leaders desperately need to internalize.
What's that?
Well, many executives assume that because their country doesn't have an overarching, finalized AI Act signed into law quite yet, they are operating in a regulatory vacuum. They think it's a free-for-all until the new laws pass.
Wait, isn't it? I mean, if the technology is brand new and the draft policy is still just, gathering public comments, doesn't that mean companies can technically use these tools however they want in the interim?
See, that is the danger of viewing tech compliance in a vacuum. Organizations in South Africa are already bound by a dense, robust web of existing legislation.
Oh.
They have to comply with the Labor Relations Act, the Employment Equity Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Furthermore, there's POPI, the Protection of Personal Information Act.
Right, data privacy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Data privacy laws mean you cannot simply scrape your employees' emails or monitor their keystrokes without explicit consent and a lawful defined purpose. The legal obligations to protect workers are already on the books. The problem is that most companies simply haven't mapped their shiny new AI tools against these decades-old laws.
Okay, let's put that to the test because this is where the actual mechanics of the law get super interesting to me. Let's look at the Labor Relations Act in South Africa.
Let's do it.
It mandates that any dismissal must have substantive and procedural fairness. Substantive meaning you need a valid, provable reason. Procedural meaning you need to follow a proper, transparent process.
Right.
Both of those concepts absolutely presuppose a human decision maker who can be cross-examined. How can an AI system possibly comply with that? I mean, an algorithm doesn't have legal personality. If a fired worker takes their case to the CCMA, the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation, and Arbitration, you can't put a piece of HR software on the witness stand.
No, you can't. And you've hit the exact friction point where traditional law and algorithmic management collide.
Yeah.
Just picture a CCMA arbitration room.
Okay.
You have the commissioner, the fired employee, and the HR representative. The commissioner asks, why was this person fired? If the HR rep answers, well, the system assigned them a 42% engagement score, the immediate follow-up will be, how exactly was that score calculated?
Naturally.
And if the HR rep says, it's a proprietary black box, we don't know the exact weighting, the entire concept of a fair hearing breaks down right there.
Because you can't cross-examine a mathematical weight.
Exactly. Furthermore, consider how AI uses proxy variables. An AI might recognize a pattern and decide to fire someone because, say, their keystroke latency dipped every day at 3:00 p.m.
Right.
But a human manager would know the employee just picks their child up from school at that time and makes up the work later. A human arbitrator would reject the AI's reasoning as fundamentally unfair. But more importantly, the law evaluates human intent.
Okay, intent.
You cannot show that an algorithm acted in good faith or bad faith because a machine does not possess intent.
It really highlights how completely unequipped traditional employment law is for this specific technology. Which naturally makes me wonder, how did corporate HR departments inherit software that pushes these legal boundaries so aggressively in the first place? Like, how did this become the standard for, I don't know, banking or logistics companies?
To understand that, Steyn points us to the origins of the code itself. This algorithmic management didn't start in traditional 9-to-5 corporate HR departments. It started in the gig economy.
The gig economy.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over the last decade, massive platform companies, ride-sharing apps, food delivery services, they essentially use their workforce as a real-time global legal laboratory. They spend years mapping the millimeter-precise boundaries of employment law.
Wait, I'm not sure I follow the connection there. How does the code used to track a food delivery driver on a scooter end up inside the performance management software of a traditional corporate bank? Those seem like completely different worlds.
It comes down to a process of deep legal optimization and vendor circulation. Gig companies needed to exert maximum control over their workers to ensure efficiency, but they had to do it without triggering the legal definition of an employer.
Because then they have to provide benefits.
Exactly. If an algorithm tells a driver exactly how and when to deliver a package, the law might classify them as an employee. If the algorithm just sets a deadline and monitors the outcome, they might remain an independent contractor. So the engineers tuned the software to skirt right on the very edge of those legal thresholds. So they learned exactly how to manage a human through an app without triggering labor rights.
Yes. And the critical insight is that this optimized code didn't stay confined to the gig economy.
It spread.
The engineers move to new jobs, the software vendors consolidate. The AI developers who now supply off-the-shelf HR tools to traditional businesses, they have incorporated those exact same mechanics.
Wow.
So when a traditional corporate bank buys a new AI performance suite, they are often unknowingly inheriting the product of a decade of gig economy legal optimization. They are installing software that was fundamentally designed to push right up to the edge of labor law.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you combine that hyper-optimized software with the realities on the ground, the stakes get incredibly high. We aren't just talking about abstract legal friction at the CCMA or, theoretical corporate compliance.
No, not at all. We are talking about devastating real-world human impacts. And Steyn centers this squarely in the context of South Africa's current economic reality. You simply cannot talk about algorithmic firing in South Africa without talking about the youth unemployment rate, which sits at a staggering 43.8%. And if you look at the expanded rate, which includes people who have just given up looking for work, it exceeds 42%.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, you realize that in an economy that fragile, an opaque, algorithmically driven, unfair dismissal is never just a localized legal failure. It is a profound social failure.
Yeah.
When a worker loses their job to a system with no name and they are told the algorithm is proprietary, so they have no meaningful avenue to challenge it, that consequence lands squarely in households.
It ripples out.
Exactly. It lands in extended communities. It fractures a social compact between employers and employees that is already under severe strain.
It's not just a bad day at the office. It's an entire family losing its livelihood with zero explanation.
And Steyn makes a point regarding this dynamic that is quite piercing. The massive gap between how fast this HR technology is moving and how slow the national regulations are moving. That isn't an accident.
You think it's on purpose?
It is a deliberately exploited feature of the technology industry. The vendors know the regulators are years behind. They use that open window to establish facts on the ground, embedding their tools so deeply into corporate infrastructure that by the time the law catches up, it's too difficult to rip the systems out.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I mean, whether you are an employee sitting at a desk, suddenly hyper-aware that your keystrokes and email response times are being analyzed, or whether you're a manager who just signed a vendor contract for one of these shiny new analytics platforms. What is the ultimate takeaway from all these sources?
Steyn distills a very clear, urgent message for boards of directors and executives. He argues forcefully that governance is a leadership function, and it must precede legislation.
Precede it, not just follow it.
Exactly. It is not merely a compliance function that gets triggered only when a new AI Act is finally gazetted. The workers aren't living in some theoretical future where perfect AI laws exist. They are living in the present, where the algorithm is already filing their termination paperwork. Right. So if an organization cannot explain to a human being exactly, rationally, why they lost their job, that is not the algorithm's problem. That is the leadership's problem.
You can't just shrug your shoulders and blame the black box you chose to buy. If the software is operating your company's name, you own the decision.
Leaders who wait for binding AI-specific obligations before they build ethical governance frameworks are already behind the curve. And frankly, as we discussed with the CCMA and existing labor laws, they are already legally exposed under the statutes that exist today.
It really reframes the whole conversation, from a technical IT issue to a matter of basic moral leadership. And there's one final thought I want to leave you with, something for you to mull over, that builds on a very specific detail Steyn mentioned in his research. He noted that many of these AI systems, the ones analyzing tone, generating baselines and scoring efficiency. They are designed, coded, and trained in completely different jurisdictions.
Right, they aren't local.
They are operating on social assumptions, proxy variables, and legal environments drawn from foreign demographics.
The training data reflects the culture of the coders, which means the systems carry the implicit norms of wherever they were built.
So think about the long-term implications of that. If the algorithms dictating who gets hired, who gets promoted, and who gets fired in local communities in Johannesburg or Manchester are secretly operating on the social assumptions of Silicon Valley or somewhere else entirely, might the ultimate worker rights movement of the future look fundamentally different than the past? Could it be that the next big labor revolt isn't just a strike against the local company itself, but a strike against the foreign training data that is quietly dictating their livelihoods?
It is a fascinating and deeply unsettling scenario. I mean, when the rules governing your daily economic survival are written into a black box on the other side of the world, who do you actually picket?
Right.
How do you strike against a data set?
It brings us right back to that empty room. You're fired, but there's no one across the desk. Just an invisible system, trained a world away, and a deafening silence when you ask for accountability. Something to think about the next time your productivity baseline gets quietly updated.